and other childcare providers are being ignored in the response to the coronavirus pandemic, according to a representative of the sector. Culham, an umbrella body representing over 4,000 providers, says there's a substantial risk that many will not survive. Around 10% of childcare provision is still open, providing care for children of key workers and vulnerable children. Jane O'Toole is the Chief Executive of Clwbiau Plant Cymru Kids Club, one of the Culham partners, and she joins me now. Good afternoon, Jane.
Good afternoon, Willie.
Tell me, what are your biggest concerns? Because there is provision for certain people, certain small businesses struggling to make it through this crisis. But what is your biggest concern about your sector in particular?
Our sector, our school childcare clubs, along with other types of childcare and playwork provision, such as Cylchoedd Maithrin, playgroups, day nurseries and childminders, we're all part of the Welsh foundational economy. We need support to survive. There's currently not sufficient support through suitable and accessible grant funding to enable them to sustain themselves. About half of our settings are managed by voluntary committees, which, with the added peril, if they're an incorporated association, committee members, which in the main are working parents, could be personally liable for any losses incurred. Most of the settings are run not-for-profit. They have little or no reserves, and so may be unable to pay their staff until they receive the furlough funding from HMRC. It's still unclear as to whether they will actually be able to apply for the furlough funding if they also receive funding from funds such as for the childcare offer or Flying Start. A decision still hasn't been made by the Welsh Treasury whether they'll be able to apply for it, despite English childcare settings receiving this confirmation.
So you're not sure that because of the way they're set up, because of the way they're organised, that they might not be able or eligible to apply for some of the money that's available?
That's right. We welcomed the announcement on the 30th of March of the Economic Resilience Fund. We thought, great, this would be the ideal scenario for settings to apply for some funding up to £10,000 for the smaller settings, until we looked into the editor's notes, which showed that childcare would be excluded as they're not VAT registered. We've talked to Welsh Government about this. Childcare is actually exempt from VAT, and I actually woke up on Easter Sunday morning pleased to see that the criteria had been updated and VAT-exempt businesses would be included, but then exasperated on the 15th of April when it was removed, the VAT-exempt criteria.
Have you seen...
The latest amendment to the criteria shows that VAT-exempt settings with a turnover of £85,000 are able to apply. Doesn't really help our sector.
Have you seen evidence... Sorry to interrupt. Have you seen evidence so far of people having to close down already, only 3 or 4 weeks into the crisis?
About 90% of settings across Wales have closed due to either lack of demand or unable to staff their provision. So they're hoping in the main to furlough their staff, but there are still other associated costs that need to be met. They've still got rent and utilities to pay. They're not eligible in the main unless they're a larger provision to access the Small Business Rates Relief Grant. There's a lack of understanding of the childcare sector by Business Wales, and what we really need is for Welsh Government to understand the needs, to listen to Culham partners, and to ensure that funding's available to help them survive.
Jane,
when the restriction...
Jane, we'll have to leave it there. That's thanks for sharing your concerns with her. That's Jane O'Toole, Chief Executive of Clwbiau Plant Cymru Kids, on problems being faced by nurseries and other childcare providers during this crisis.